All right, I want to talk a little bit about messaging interoperability using MLS, using the MIMI protocol that is currently being developed, and of course using XMPP. And I would start a little bit with a history of messaging interoperability. You might know any of these, like from 25 years ago, where we had a lot of different messengers, and all of them are kind of walled garden services. All of them are not interoperable at all, and each of them required their own client. Nobody really liked that, but that was what was available back then. And then there was this software, it's a Pigeon, which appeared in the early 2000s, and that allowed us to have a single client use multiple networks. And that was great because you'd only need one client, but you still needed to connect to all the networks. It was a high complexity in the client, and that was good at the time when messaging apps or messaging services were not very complex, but maybe not so much later, which we will see in the future. We also had XMPP around the same time, and XMPP already had the idea that they wanted to have gateways where on the server you would basically run such a multi-messenger client, a multi-protocol client that would connect to other messengers for you. So the server would do it would do the work for the client, and the client would only need to understand a single protocol. That reduces the workload on the client, makes it much easier to scale on the client, have different clients for different platforms because all of them only have to speak a single protocol to the server. That was actually kind of a success. XMPP was a success at the time. People used Google Talk to talk to people on ICQ, things like that, and it all worked because Google Talk was using XMPP, and as long as you used the service, someone was using a service using XMPP, they could connect to all their friends on all the networks. And that was working quite well. But then there was like this revolution. For some reason, someone invented smartphones, and when smartphones were invented, people suddenly were unable to use anything that's not a phone number to talk to other people. So if you want to reach someone on their phone, you need to use their phone numbers. And so WhatsApp and others became what is being used because they used the phone number as an identifier for users rather than as screen name of AIM or the ICQ number or whatever was used by the other services before. Now it's only the phone number. So the logos changed, but the systems changed. Now there's still walled gardens. Yes, they are more modern. They use encryption, but the fundamental design remained the same, which means Pigeon again was an option. But as I said, it's very hard if the protocols get more complex. And with end-to-end encryption, it's already getting way more complex. And because all of these walled gardens use different end-to-end encryption protocols, all of them incompatible with each other, there was a lot of work, and eventually Pigeon was not able to keep up, and it basically no longer exists today. Same with XMPP, essentially, the gateways. There's been some work, and it's, as I said, it's a little bit easier if you run the component on the server, because on the client side is less work. But also, if you have to do it on the server, then you have to break the end-to-end encryption, which is kind of is against the whole purpose of end-to-end encryption, that you decrypt on the server. You want to decrypt on the client. So in the end, that's also not a very good solution. There's also metrics now that was not available back then. They also claim to have all the nice bridges to other networks, and they have exactly the same issues. That didn't help either. But then there's something that happened, and that rather recently, and that's the Digital Markets Act in the European Union, that required some big tech companies to open their services for interoperability. Meaning that they actually wanted certain, what they call gatekeepers, to provide APIs or any other services that would make it for everyone possible to connect to their services. And they designated first two gatekeepers and the services, which was Meta and Apple. Meta for both Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, and Apple for iMessage. And Apple appealed to that. So actually, iMessage is not covered by the Digital Markets Act, but Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp are. And they came up with something that they call an interoperability solution, which they nicely have a nice website and will report to the European Commission that they did all the things that they are required to do for the Digital Markets Act. But in practice, they have they have not decided to use XMPP, even though their systems internally use XMPP. But they decided for the compatibility with the Digital Markets Act to not use XMPP, so that you cannot use existing libraries or existing tools that were available for XMPP, but you had to do something completely from scratch, a lot of work. And at the same time, they put a lot of restrictions on this interoperability API. So they will make rules that are very arbitrary, and there's probably no legal basis for these rules, but they still made them. Things like you are required to have your servers hosted in the EU to be able to use these services, which already makes it hard to use any cloud providers because they might be, well, it's in the cloud, it might be anywhere. So to date, nobody is using these APIs, even though they already exist for 2 years, which kind of shows that it's completely useless what they did there, or intentionally, of course, because they did not want to open to third parties. So this is now a little bit where the MIMI protocol comes in, which is MIMI for more instant messaging interoperability. It's a protocol developed at the IETF, which is the Internet Standards Body. So they are developing all the standards that run the internet. For example, also XMPP back then 25 years ago was also developed at the IETF, and basically any other protocol used in the internet. And they saw that there's now, with the Digital Markets Act, but also there was discussions around about this before elsewhere, that there's interest by people to be able to interoperate between message services. So they wanted to create the building blocks so that the services can actually work together. And the building blocks, that means they need something for the end-to-end encryption that is standardized, so that all of them use the same end-to-end encryption. Because if we have different end-to-end encryption, then there's somewhere where the end-to-end encryption need to be broken, just as I said with the bridges that we use in XMPP right now, or on metrics. You also need something to deliver the messages from one service to the other, because you have multiple services and there needs to be a protocol to do that. There needs to be some way to discover users. As I explained, users are now used to just having a phone number, and that's the only way to reach a person. So we need to have a way to find out where to send a message if I want to send it to a phone number, which could be any service technically. So there needs to be some way to figure out which service to send the message to when I send a message. And then lastly, if we encrypt have end-to-end encryption, then what appears to the client in the end is exactly what was sent by the other client from the other end, because everything in between cannot be seen by any server or any intermediary entity. That means that both clients need to speak the same language, need to support the same format of data being transferred. So think about information about is the message a reaction or a reply to another message. That's an information that needs to be conveyed throughout the network in a standardized way as well. All of this would technically already have been possible with XMPP. So it's not that nothing like this existed before, but the IETF decided that they want to do something new. And why did they do so? Well, the main reason is that the IETF works with the concept of rough consensus, which means that if there's also a rough consensus for not using something, then it is not going to be used, and we do something else instead. And if we look at the market, at the industry at the time, then there clearly was a rough consensus to not use XMPP. We see that we've seen that WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger decided to not use XMPP for the interoperability, even though they use it internally. So yeah, that is why they decided to not use XMPP. Will there be a consensus to use MIMI? I don't know, but that's another question. We know that XMPP has no consensus. But the good thing is that XMPP can be made compatible with MIMI. The extensible design of XMPP allows us to extend where we want to, and MIMI is not by its design, not in a technical conflict to XMPP. So that is not necessarily an issue that they designed a new protocol. Also, MIMI specifically does not look at the connection between clients and servers, so how the client communicate with their service. That's not part of MIMI. They don't want to include that because it's really about interoperability between services. And that is why they, even with MIMI being widely adopted, there would still be a use case for something like XMPP, because we need something between client and service. The first building block which I mentioned is encryption. And while today, or at the time back then, but also still today, most messaging system use Signal or Signal's double redshift protocol. Omimo is using that in the background, Matrix they're almost using it in the background, WhatsApp is using that in the background. So all of them are using the Signal protocol in the background. The Signal protocol is not an open standard, right? It is developed by the Signal Foundation, and they publish some documentation about it, but there's no open development. The documentation they provide is incomplete. And there's also even some copyright concerns around using this protocol. So that's why WhatsApp, for example, actually, like Facebook for WhatsApp, they actually paid for a license to the Signal Foundation because it was not clear if you can use the Signal protocol without a license from the Signal Foundation. MLS does not have this issue. MLS is an open standard. It's specifically meant and designed to be an open standard. Also no patents or anything like that involved. It also has a bunch of advantages over Signal, mainly that it is specifically meant for also being used in groups or in group chats, which means it actually can maintain a group state in an encrypted system, which means that there is a consensus within a group who is actually a member of the group. If you look at Signal, how it works internally is essentially that if I send a message to a group, I will just send a message to each participant of the group. That also doesn't really scale well, whereas so if you have a really large group, you would actually need to send a lot of messages. That's why most messages today have actually that use encryption have actually a limit on the number of users you can have in a group. It's typically around 100 or something. And if you want more, then the only way would be to not encrypt, because the Signal protocol really does not support that much. MLS also does not have that issue. The scaling it to more users is no issue in MLS because of how it internally manages a group. So then if we look also in MLS for the industry, there's also some big advantages there. I mentioned that with Signal, there's essentially the one official Signal implementation by the Signal Foundation, and not much more. With MLS, there's several implementations already out there, backed by also companies that make an effort to make this good implementation. They use it internally, and they are used in production systems. There's from Cisco, there's from Amazon. They use that in their systems internally, so these are well-maintained libraries, and they are open source and can be used by everyone. So that also makes it much better to adopt MLS instead of the Signal protocol. And lastly, we also see that some other open standards, or not so, let's say standards, started to adopt the MLS encryption, and that is true for RCS. The universal profile of the latest version of the universal profile of RCS actually also uses MLS for encryption, and Apple announced that they are going to implement that. So for messaging between Apple and Android devices. So eventually the MLS will have really large adoption for all kinds of messages. So yeah, MLS is a good bet on the encryption side. Then MIMI also had to develop as I mentioned, the transport protocol from server to server. They have something that's based on HTTPS. There's some inspirations from the Matrix protocol in there, but because long time ago, 2 years or 3 years, Matrix was still involved in the MIMI development. They don't have the funding anymore for that, so they are mostly not involved with MIMI anymore. But at the time they were, so some of their influence showed up here, that they use HTTPS as a transport protocol. The protocol is pretty simple. It has the same federated structure that we know from for example, XMPP. So you have a server, you have the server where the users are on, and you have a server where the group chat is hosted, and they can be the same, but they don't need to be. And then if you send a message, you would just send it from your server, will send it for you to the server that has the group in it, and the group will forward it to all the servers that are in the group. So again, that is similar design that we have in XMPP, which means that it's very easy to be interoperable with XMPP. Then MIMI also defined a new payload format. So payload format is that what is encrypted, what is sent in the encrypted messages. The new format is based on designs from the email standard. So it uses similar design structures as the MIME, which means you can have multiple alternatives, you can have attachments, things like that you're used to from email. That's what they built into that. It also uses a CBOR encoding. CBOR is a encoding system similar to JSON from what it can do, but it uses binary, so it's way more efficient, which is important if you think about large groups that are encrypted. Sending a single message to 10,000 or 100,000 participants of a group, maybe, that every byte counts in the end. So it's good to use some binary encoding there because it's more efficient. And I said user discovery. Want to be fair here, the MIMI working group is still working. It's a working group, right? So it's not finished yet, and user discovery is one of the things where it's very unclear what to do. There's some idea what they want to have. Mainly, you want to be able to have a phone number being resolved to the service that the user chooses, but it's very unclear how to do that because the most obvious approach would be to go to the entity that is responsible for the phone number, but that is typically a carrier, and the carrier has no interest in allowing you to, well, select the service of your choice. They probably want to make you use their service, which may be RCS or maybe they use something else, depending on which carrier you're talking about. So that's why everyone is a little bit unclear what to do here. If there's no, let's say, government or any other entity that has actually regulator that actually has control over this going to say that you're required as a carrier to allow the user to select freely, then there's probably no good option there. And we have to continue figuring out that on the side of the services themselves, and not have an interoperable standard to do that. Okay, so what's in it for XMPP? Because we all like XMPP. I already mentioned MLS. MLS makes sense as a building block for XMPP, completely independent of MIMI, because it is has much better scalability properties. There will also be less bugs because there's a consistent group state, so there will not be that some people think that a person is in the group and some people don't believe that that's the case, and then there will messages not be encrypted to some users. So that confusion will not be the case with MLS. There's a single group state and there's a consensus in a group who is a member of the group. It also has some additional metadata privacy properties, so we can, the group state is encrypted actually, so the server does not need to know who is in the group, because only those people that are actually in the group will be able to see who is in the group, and that's everything that matters. The server doesn't need to know. I'm actually working on getting MLS ready for XMPP. I expect it to happen before end of the year, to have a draft running that we can implement. Then it will probably take several years until it actually gets widely adopted in the network, because it's a decentralized network. It will take time for people to actually implement it. But implementing MLS in XMPP will also give some advantages to the wider ecosystem. Think of Pigeon again. If everyone is going to implement MLS as an encryption, then for Pigeon it's much easier to implement a protocol because the encryption layer is the same on every protocol. So that's also a plus for adopting MLS. And I mentioned RCS is using MLS, so maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something for JMP in there. If you ever want to support RCS, there might be some potential use case here. So the big question, will MIMI actually give us more interoperability? I can't answer this question, of course. I kind of doubt that the big providers will voluntarily use MIMI and interrupt with any other company, any other providers, companies, or whoever. But we know that the regulators are interested in forcing them. We see that the Digital Market Act tried to go in this direction. We also know that the regulators in the US and in other countries are actually interested in forcing the providers to do better interoperability. But even if they don't, it will still be a potential for interoperability between the small providers. Think of like XMPP interoperating with metrics, maybe interoperating with, I don't know, Wire or any of the other smaller ones. And that is also a good thing, because if the small ones work together, then they become bigger, and we don't need the big tech. Yeah, that's everything from me. If you have any question, I don't think we have a lot of time, but maybe one or two. Yeah.
So it sounds like MIMI is almost like an activity hub for messaging. So where you have all these different services, like Mastodon, Vertica, or whatever, in the background to talk to each other, they're all passing messages in your activity. So from just set up XMPP for like Matrix, XMPP wired through the do you think that will happen? And we'll see like a client being able to support, let's say, I'm looking at your own XMPP, could we send each other messages using
Yeah, so I think it will happen with some providers. So some services that exist already have expressed interest. Signal specifically is not interested, for what I know, and maybe they change their opinion once everything is ready, and they see that there is users that they can win back or something like that. But right now they are not interested. Who is interested, as I already mentioned, Wire is interested and actually already deployed MLS, not MIMI yet, but they already deployed MLS in their system. And with Matrix is also interested in MLS. There's a company working from Germany also working on supporting MLS to Matrix. So MLS is the first step to that, and once we have MLS, MIMI is actually rather easy compared to the encryption, which is the complex part typically.
You said Signal was interested. Have you heard anything from the Molly fork?
What?
The Molly fork, the open fork of Signal?
I don't think they could. Like the question was about the Molly fork, and I don't think the Molly fork could implement that because they connect to the same server. So the Signal server side needs to do some things. Some parts can be done on the client side, and that's what Molly would have control on. But the server side needs to be doing the server side protocol, and that is something that Molly cannot control. So if Signal does not implement it, Molly is out as well.
You mentioned that you expect to have something, a draft, up by the end of the year. Your speaker page doesn't have a link or anything. And is there somewhere I can like follow your blog or?
Yeah. If you are subscribed to the XMPP mailing list, it will be published there, definitely. You can follow me on Mastodon, which I don't think I have on the speaker page. I can add it later, or it's at llama@mastodon.social.
Llama?
Llama, L-A-R-M-A. Okay. And that's it, I guess.